edition of Packers Unscripted. From Packers.com, I am Mike Spofford, joined as always by my trusted colleague Wes Hodkiewicz. We are back from our summer break training camp. Wes, the first practice is right around the corner. It is tomorrow. We are going to preview training camp here on this show. But as some famous song likes to introduce things, my question for you is, are you ready for this?
Got to be ready for this. It's crazy. I always like to tell the little bit of a dad joke about how this is the fastest 6 months of the year. But here we are. And for the Green Bay Packers, I think all these years that I've covered the team, and you have a couple more on me, I don't know if there's ever been a time where I feel like there's more need for football than right now. I just feel like we've talked so much and there have been so many narratives and honestly a lot of swerves throughout the offseason, a lot of questions from pretty much every interval through this process, beginning with the extensions back at the beginning of the year and then kind of trickling into who came, who left, and now certainly all these player extensions that Green Bay has done. There's been a lot of movement and a lot of developments, and now we finally get to see on the field what the 2026 Green Bay Packers have capable of them.
Yeah, well, for all of the good news that has transpired this offseason, the contract extensions, and one that was the latest one just announced yesterday, defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt getting extension. Yeah. We talked earlier in the offseason, Jaden Reed and Christian Watson, and all the talk about guys coming back from injury and all of that. There's a lot of excitement and everything building up to this, but at the same time, and I think this goes to your point of, it's time for football, because the Packers ended last season on such a downer. Yep. The 5 straight losses, the blowing the lead in the playoff game in Chicago and all of that. And you're never really going to get past that until you get to the new season, until you start playing games again, and it's a clean slate. It's a fresh start. And that fresh start begins with training camp and that first practice tomorrow. So I'll throw this out to you, and you and I can just kind of go back and forth on maybe what's top of mind for us. But there will be a lot of storylines that we'll be following throughout the course of training camp here. What is at the top of the list for you?
Well, I think when you begin training camp, 2 things are always, and I hopefully don't steal both of these from you, but the 2 things that always jump out to you, the first time we step out at Ray Nitschke Field, we look out on the grass, we have our pen and our paper and all of that. It's, okay, who's practicing and who's playing where with the first and second team offense and defense.
Right.
And, you go through the years, Michael, whether it was 2012 with Jared Bush getting the first shot at the perimeter cornerback job as Charles Woodson began that transition to playing safety in the base, and you go through all the, in 2015, who's going to be lining up? Is this going to be, an offense that's predicated on, Aaron Rodgers and passing the football or running the football? Is this Eddie Lacy's offense? That, there's always been these question marks that go into these seasons, and for me, it's just seeing what we've watched from the outside the entire way while Matt LaFleur and the coaching staff have built their game plans, have devised their schemes, and now we get to see, what was their thought process? Who are they going to be building this thing around? And to me, that's always one of the most exciting things, in addition to the fact that, hey, where's Tucker Kraft at? Devontae Wyatt just signed the extension. Is he good to go?
Yeah.
Zach Tom coming off of the knee injury last season. Is he ready to go? All those things that were kind of hanging on from the offseason program, seeing who's able to go right from the get-go, and also who maybe are those guys that sit out the first week and then you get to, family night and they're back in the fold.
Yeah, the big 4 as far as the injuries are concerned, I think are the names that everybody is going to be following as far as when they get back on the field. Now, we are not expecting the biggest of those names, Micah Parsons, to be on the field during training camp. But you mentioned 3 of the other ones, Tucker Kraft, Zach Tom, Devontae Wyatt. Those guys were all missing when last season ended on a sour note, and there's a process for all of them, obviously, to get healthy, to get ramped up and ready to go. But you just know, you sense with this fan base and with all the chatter that's around the team this year, that a lot of eyes are going to be on those players, and when they're back, when they're ready to go. And the hope is that as many of them as possible can be good to go for Week 1 in Minnesota.
Yeah, and the one thing I was reminded of throughout this offseason, if there was ever any question at all that Tucker Kraft might be already in a pantheon of his own among Packer fans, that was reiterated, because not only is this guy a good, talented, young, ascending tight end, but he's taken on cult hero status with this team. I mean, how many times, Mike, do you and I open Insider Inbox right now, and among those questions is, where are the Packers at in an extension with Tucker Kraft?
Yeah.
Why isn't that deal done yet? And I will just continue to assure fans that if, unfortunately, that knee injury didn't occur, I assume this would have been the offseason of Tucker Kraft in that regard. And instead, it's been an offseason of rehab for him, but the way this guy has attacked this thing, the videos that he's put out, the way he's talking, I mean, he is completely invested not only in becoming the best tight end in this league, but doing it with the Green Bay Packers. So I've urged a little bit of patience. I think both of these teams, with both the Packers and Kraft and his team, I think they're going to do right by each other, but you just got to breathe for a second here. But once number 85 is cleared, when he is back out on the practice field, the shot of juice that's going to give this team and this fan base, just like with Micah Parsons on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think there is a tangible value you can put on that. It is immeasurable.
There's almost this expectation for me that there's going to be some kind of a harness put on Tucker Kraft because it's like the medical staff, the coaching staff is going to have to hold him, like physically hold him back from from going just full bore all out, like right from day one, because that's just his mentality.
That's what he was doing in rehab.
Yeah, exactly. He has been full speed ahead throughout this entire process, and the anticipation of seeing him back on the field, throwing a block on the edge, catching a pass down the seam from Jordan Love. I mean, the anticipation of those things is kind of palpable.
I will not name names. That is not the game I play here. But I will tell you, between Watson last offseason and Kraft this offseason, the way those two guys attacked the rehab, I have seen guys practicing with less effort at times than those two did in their actual physical rehab to get back.
Very true.
They just wanted to be back with this football team and show what they're capable of. And I'll tell you this, one, if Tucker Kraft comes back at half of what he was doing last season, you're already looking at one of the top young tight ends in the league. But if he comes back the way that Christian Watson did last year, I mean, look out.
Yeah, wow. Well, there are going to be some positional battles, roster battles, all that kind of stuff going on over the next month. There'll be family night. There'll be 3 preseason games, lots of stuff to sort out. And as much as there are going to be many in the media sphere who are going to try to pick the 53-man roster before the pads even go on, we're here to talk about some of those competitions and what we will have our eye on. For me, the one that's at the top of the list is at cornerback in Jonathan Gannon's new defense, because the Packers have Keyshawn Nixon as their number 1 corner, but you have this collection now: Carrington Valentine, free agent Benjamin, St. Juste, and then the second-round draft pick, the first pick the Packers had in this past draft, Brandon Cisse from South Carolina. Those 3 guys, only one of them can be the number 2 cornerback. I like where things are from a depth perspective, regardless of who wins the job and who's going to come off the bench and be the sub-package guys, etc. But that competition for a starting cornerback job is, it feels to me, out of the gate here, partially since Cisse is a rookie and was just getting his feet wet in the spring, and St. Juste missed a large portion of OTAs and minicamp and whatnot because of an injury. It feels like this is a competition that is going to take the entire training camp to sort out.
Yeah, and just extremely high stakes, right? And they're all play the position differently. They are all built differently. Their strengths are different, and the Packers have cast such a wide net here to try to find that guy that's going to start opposite Nixon. And also the fact of building depth at that position that by the end of last year they really lacked. Let me tell you a little bit of a cheat sheet that I've devised now, and probably in 15 years, if I'm still employed. I'm guessing you'll be on a beach somewhere. I'll be telling the other young writer at Packers.com, this is the way I always approach things. When you ask what's the biggest competition in training camp, it'll always come back to me, which position did they add the most bodies, and which position did they draft multiple players? This offseason, it was the cornerback position. Brian Gutekunst telegraphed it.
Yeah.
He told everybody he was going to do it, even after signing Benjamin St-Juste. And he invested those resources.
And Packers, even with the limited draft picks,
yes.
he used multiple at that position, which is also a big sign.
Yeah, and I was super impressed by what I saw from Cisse during the offseason program. The way he triggers and the speed with which he plays. I don't know if it's tomorrow. I don't know if it's next month. But this guy is going to make an impact for this football team. You can see it. It's in the DNA, in the way he attacks it, and the fact that he's as young as he is playing in that position. I mean, his upside, when you're looking at what I refer to as like the de facto number one pick for the Packers, because there was no first rounder. But
right.
to make that investment in the second round, we saw it with Casey Hayward right out of the gate in 2012. We've seen it time and time again where these guys can come in and make an impact. I think Brandon Cisse on the field, you're going to see him doing something sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's going to have an impact here. How the competition itself sorts out, Benjamin St-Juste was a 3-year starter in Washington, but probably had the best year of his career in more of a part-time role with the Chargers last year, which really attracted the Packers then to add him to the mix and to see what he can bring. And then you have Carrington Valentine, who, in my opinion, has shown a lot of what needs to be shown, but then it always feels like because of an injury or something that slows him down or sets him back, he hasn't quite, fully hit his stride yet. Like, it's there, we see it at times, but then something always kind of gets in the way. And is this the year that nothing gets in the way for Carrington Valentine and he really takes off? I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but the competition is going to be there, and whoever it is that's lining up with the number one defense come week one opposite Keyshawn Nixon is going to have to earn it.
Yeah, and the stakes, I was talking about how high they are. I don't know if there's any player on the roster that there's higher stakes for than Carrington Valentine. I mean, this guy has started all these postseason games, but never really been a starter week one for the Packers and their defense. I think last year had a golden opportunity, but didn't come away with any interceptions. There were some bits, fits and starts and inconsistency there. But the guy has it. He's had it since he walked into the building as a 7th-round pick. I mean, there's a swagger there. There's a confidence there that you cannot coach. Can he put it all together? Can he show the Packers that despite these resources that you've invested in this position, despite signing St-Juste, I can still be the guy for this defense? And what I like more than anything completely is the fact that there are no questions now about depth on the perimeter. That was a real thing last year at the end of last season, especially after Kamal Haddon went down.
Right.
Okay, if somebody goes down outside, who's going in? Fortunately, Keyshawn Nixon has been a rock. And for the large part, Carrington Valentine has been able to stay out there. But you need to have bodies to navigate a season. I like the versatility they have in that secondary right now, and the fact that if somebody does go down, they have somebody with credentials that can step in.
Well, I think the other competition on defense that we will be watching directly tied to Micah Parsons' absence at this point, and that is at the edge rusher spot. We're expecting Lucas Van Ness to take on a major role here. Hopefully he's got his injury issues behind him, that foot injury that he got off to a really solid start last year, first 5-6 games of the season. Then the foot injury crops up when he gets the sack of Joe Flacco, and then that ended up being a much more difficult and troublesome injury than anybody thought it would be initially. And then he doesn't really get back until the very end of the season, but then he gets a sack in the playoff game of Caleb Williams in Chicago, right? So it's all there for Lucas Van Ness, and the opportunity is there. But what's going to be happening on the other side? There's Barron Sorrell and Colin Oliver, 2 draft picks in the middle rounds from last year. You have a 4th-round pick from this year, Dennis Sutton. You have a veteran guy who dealt with injuries last year, kind of 2025 ended up being a wash for Brenton Cox Jr., but this is a guy that at the end of 2024, after Preston Smith was traded, Brenton Cox really showed that he belonged in the NFL and that he can be an impact player here in Green Bay. So you have all these guys in the mix. There are only so many snaps to go around, but you talk about you talk about a competition and a battle for who's going to be out there and who's going to earn something. Until Micah Parsons gets back, that edge rusher spot is one to watch.
It's all to play for right now. I mean, Aaron Mosby factors into that too, although he's been more of a special teams guy.
Right.
Nigel Kelly out of UCF, that was their highest guarantee for an undrafted rookie that they made. Dude has credentials too, played at Miami before transferring to UCF. There are so many guys that could factor in this competition. What I like about it is, yeah, in the interim, they have to figure out how they're going to replace Micah Parsons. But, Mike, what's really the biggest question? When you get to week whatever it is, let's say it's midseason, let's say it's the second half of the season, whenever it could be week 5 against the Bears. When Parsons is back on the field, who fills out that rotation? That's what the Packers have to decide right now, because everybody's going to get a shot at this thing. There might be a starter. Barron Sorrell might be the starter in week 1, but Colin Oliver, if healthy, will get snaps. Brenton Cox Jr. will get snaps. I really like Denai Dennis Sutton. I that was one that you and I talked about in the post, kind of wake of the draft. The way that this guy is built, the production that he's had with different players across from him, whether he did have a first-round pick or not, the guy produced. He has a tremendous build for the position. He's lengthy. He's got the size. So there's been these people, no disrespect to them. I appreciate every single one of their fans that checks out Insider Inbox and helps pay Mike and I's mortgage. But the fact is that there's so many people who are like, well, what about, Jadeveon Clowney? What about, some of these other guys, Bosa, these free agents? And it's like, folks, you do not sign a veteran like that on the precipice of a season if you don't believe in the pieces you already have in-house. Injuries can happen. Positional depth can wear. That's where you'll see those guys eventually sign, and that's when they'll eventually land somewhere. But for now, I am so excited to see the runway be cleared for all these young guys. There is no people really holding on to like 80% of the snaps. There's no Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary that are going to play 75% of the snaps. It's all out there. And I think it's going to bring out the best in that group.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do need to take care of some sponsor business. And when we signed on, I neglected to say we were coming to you from our Potawatomi Sportsbook studio. There are other sponsors as well, so let's hear from them right now. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. Welcome back to Packers Unscripted, previewing training camp here with my partner in all things Packers, Wes Hodkiewicz, with the first practice of training camp, roughly, I guess I'd say 24 hours away from when we are currently recording
probably
this.
About 18 hours away from when it gets posted.
Yeah.
And maybe 5 hours ago when people finally listen to it.
Something like that. Well, there are a couple of... We've been talking about the competitions and drilling down into some of the details and whatnot, but there are some big picture type of things to look at here in training camp, too, because... the Packers have 2 new coordinators on the coaching staff. It's Jonathan Gannon running the defense. It is Cam Acord taking over on special teams. I don't know how much we are necessarily going to learn from a schematic standpoint, et cetera, with regard to the look of the defense and the special teams. Usually it takes a handful of games before you really get a sense of that. But this is a big training camp when you're making that much of a transition in 2 of the 3 phases, and that is something to watch here as the month of August rolls along.
I'll tell you what, Mike, more than anything with the offseason program, I watched the first team defense. I really had my eyes locked into it because I was just curious about how it's going to look. What kind of system are they installing here? Again, it's not in pads, so you can't really take too much away from like the combat aspect of it, but the mental side of it is important. And I left that last practice of minicamp and looking at it as this is going to be an exciting defense to watch. I think the Packers have a lot of intriguing pieces. I think they've added a couple spots too, whether it's a guy like Zaire Franklin that I think has the largest chip on his shoulder that you could possibly have after how everything ended in Indianapolis and wanting to prove that he's still an all-pro linebacker.
Yeah.
Even though somebody last night about 2:30 in the morning sent me an email lambasting me in the story I wrote yesterday for referring to him as an all-pro linebacker. It's former all-pro linebacker. Somebody out there felt that was necessary in the middle of the night to send me that message. I appreciate that.
It's not like his All-Pro honor was 10 years ago. It was only 2 years ago. But yes.
Sure.
But
former though. Whatever gets you to sleep.
But we digress.
But no, Franklin's there.
Yeah.
You have Javon Hargrave there, and these pieces that they've added that have experience with Gannon, mixed with all these guys that the Packers have coming back. I mentioned this in Insider Inbox that, I mean, if you want the ultimate endorsement for Devontae Wyatt, Jonathan Gannon came in here, never saw the guy practice, never did anything on the field during the offseason program, and is like, yep, let's get that done. We need that guy in this scheme.
Yeah.
Brian Gutekunst, his scouts, Matt LaFleur, they've seen it. They've seen how he's grown. They saw after they lost Kenny last year how he took over in that spot, how he ran away with that position. They have playmakers and impact guys at all these different spots. Now it's up to Jonathan Gannon with his scheme, with his deception. He's going to be the one that gets to play with all these pieces. And I think that's really exciting. When you can take a defense and the positive things that Jeff Hafley did last year and now put a new twist on it with Gannon, I think it's only going to make the Packers better.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by by those veteran additions when you talk about Javon Hargrave in the middle of the defensive line, him lining up next to Devontae Wyatt, that sort of opens your eyes, when it gets to that point. But Zaire Franklin next to Edgerrin Cooper at the linebacker level has me intrigued too. And this is not meant as some kind of a knock on Quay Walker because it's going to kind of sound like that, but it's not what I mean. But Quay Walker was almost as young a player as Edgerrin Cooper. And then Jeff Hafley comes in as defensive coordinator, and Quay Walker has to learn a brand new defense as a young player. I've always wondered, okay, Edgerrin Cooper looks like, a superstar in the making, potentially, with what he brings to the field. Is it going to be a true veteran, proven, been there, done that pro like Zaire Franklin that allows Edgerrin Cooper to really flourish, right? And again, I'm not knocking Quay Walker. That guy played some really, really good football for 4 seasons for the Packers, and kudos to him for the contract that he got with the Raiders. But the Packers decided to spend their resources elsewhere, and Edgerrin Cooper is the guy at that level, at that second level of the defense, who is potentially the next star in the making. And so how are they going to get the most out of Edgerrin Cooper? And I think the signing of Zaire Franklin was partly with that in mind.
I absolutely love that take, because it reminds me of what Lucas Patrick and Corey Linsley and a bunch of guys had said to me. You go back to 2017 when the Packers signed Jari Evans, and the impact that he had. He was a fine player that year. It ended up being his last year in the NFL.
Yeah, he was finishing up.
Hall of Fame type caliber dude.
Yep.
But the takeaway for Patrick, for Linsley, for David Bakhtiari, seeing that type of professional that's made it that long in the league at that position, how beneficial it was for those guys, whether you were an undrafted guy or whether you were already in that all-pro echelon like Bakhtiari. I think that's what Franklin brings here. And when you look at it too, Mike, it's not just Cooper, right? It's Tyron Hopper has spent 2 years learning the Mike position. What is that going to be like for him now, seeing a guy like Franklin who's been in the league for almost a decade now, that has done it at a high level, has had to scratch and claw for those opportunities. Isaiah McDuffie is still in there. There are so many different types of linebackers that the Packers have acquired, and as they make this transition into Gannon's scheme now, I can't remember if you were on vacation or not when I wrote this, but there was a time, man, where the Packers were converting outside linebackers, and they were having Morgan Burnett play inside linebackers. This is as deep as the Packers have ever been at inside backer. It's been that way the last 3-4 years because that's the way you have to play now in this league. And I think Franklin is a really intriguing piece to add to that mix.
And my point about Walker, just so I'm clear here, he was a young player who still had a lot of his own stuff to figure out. And with, changes at defensive coordinator and learning a new scheme, and he's wearing the communication helmet and all that. My point is, I don't know how much Quay Walker was actually able to help Edgerrin Cooper in his first 2 years in the NFL, because he had plenty of his own stuff to deal with, and he handled all of that pretty well. I just think there's a whole nother level for Edgerrin Cooper out there that with a different dynamic and a different setup here. And yes, now Edgerrin Cooper has to learn, another defense the second time, in his 3 years in the NFL here. He has to go through that process now as well. But that having that accomplished all-pro caliber veteran player next to him. I'm really intrigued as to what that might mean.
Age is not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want no disrespect to Washington. You don't want to be like the Commanders, where it was like it seemed like they had like their average age of last year's team was like 29 years old. But to have some veterans in the mix that can help bring guys along, and while still competing at a high level, that's a good thing, especially if you're as young as the Packers have been. And there was someone I was talking to a couple days ago because we were going back and forth about 3 years in a row the youngest team, and this was someone within the organization. The remark was, well, Tyrod took care of that, Zaire took care of that. All these guys that they brought in, there's a different level to it, and mixing that in now with what the Packers have a bunch of veterans that they've grown themselves, that they've developed themselves. And now you get some outside perspectives now to kind of balance all of that experience.
And you said it from the beginning with regard to Franklin, a veteran guy who definitely has a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. I mean, this is a guy who was an All-Pro 2 seasons ago, and then after statistically, a little bit of a drop-off, the Colts decided to trade him for a part-time defensive lineman.
Yeah. That's
something that's going to stick with a guy like Franklin, and he's going to be out to he's going to be out to prove something here. Quickly on special teams before we go. A lot of eyes will be on the whole kicking situation. 6th-round pick Trey Smack out of Florida. Lucas Haversick is the competition. Brandon McManus is no longer here, as we had talked about during the offseason. Packers have got to get this kicking position figured out. Really, when you look at the last 3 seasons, it feels like in the back half of 2024, when Brandon McManus was kind of in that groove, that's the last time that really the only time in the last 3 years that the kicking situation has felt comfortable to a certain extent. And the Packers have to get back to that. And hopefully Trey Smack is the guy to do it. If he's not, hopefully Lucas Haversick is up to the task. But that is that's something that's got to get figured out for this team to get where it wants to go.
And everybody understands the sense of urgency with this. I was talking with Lucas in the offseason about this. I mean, the margin for error there is so small, and there's so many guys that can do this. Not do it maybe at the highest of levels, but there's a lot of guys that can kick a football 50 yards. But can you do it when the pressure's on? Can you do it with an offensive line and a defensive line standing in front of you? And can you be the guy that the team needs you to be? The Packers were lucky in that even through the highs and lows, Mason Crosby was that guy. There was, with the exception of probably the 12 season, the middle part of the 12 season, there was never a time in which Mason Crosby went out there that I had a pit in my stomach, like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
He made a lot. He missed some. But you always knew that you were getting the best of Mason Crosby on that particular attempt. Now, you look with what the Packers have dealt with, I know there's a lot of people like, why didn't you figure it out? This is a difficult thing to do. When you look at the money, like Indianapolis threw at Matt Gay a couple years ago, maybe the highest kicker in the league. He was out of there in a few years. You look at the situation that unfolded after the Bears moved on from Robbie Gould. They have a great kicker right now in Cairo Santos. It took them a long time. It took them a lot of legs to get to that spot.
Yep.
The Packers are trying to find that path, and we're gonna make a lot of the training camp practices, and people will be charting the makes and misses for Smack. They'll be charting the makes and misses for Haversick. I want to see family night. I want to see the preseason games.
Yep.
I want to see those environments.
That's when That's when the pressure is going to be on, and we've been answering questions in Insider Inbox about Trey Smack and his leg strength has made 10 50-plus yard kicks in his career at Florida, which was a school record. His long was 56. And I know there's going to be a lot when it comes to the practice field and family night, about the long field goals and all that. And I'm not even worried about the leg strength. It's like in this day and age in the NFL, if that kick is inside 50 yards, the expectation is that kick is going to be made. And yes, nobody is perfect. But the Packers need to have a 95% proposition when the kick is inside 50. Yeah, the 55-yarders and the 58-yarders, that's great. And Haversick made a 61-yarder last year that proved to be big in a victory out in Arizona. But it's when that kick is inside 50 yards, when the drive stalls and it's not 4th and 1, but it's 4th and 7, and you don't really have the option to go for it, and that kick is 47 yards, that kick has got to be made. Yep. And for this offense to score the number of points that it's expected to score, those kicks have got to be made, and that's what the Packers are looking for.
And it's got to be made under less than ideal circumstances, right? I mean, and this is not a dig on Brandon McManus, but when you look at the National Football League, I think there's a lot of times where kickers will be like, well, this didn't go right or this didn't go right. I mean, you go back to, 2021, 2022, Mason Crosby gets a brand new holder in Corey Bojorquez before the start of the season. He's left-handed, left-footed, and they're trying to figure out their rhythm, their battery there. And it was a tough road. And I know Mason probably felt some type of way about it, but just kept digging away at it because that's the job. That's the requirement.
Yep.
And the Packers are in a good spot in that they have the punter. They figured the punter spot out. That was something that plagued them for a little bit. Daniel Whelan, I think, is going to be a Green Bay Packer for a very long time. Matt Orzik is kind of settled into that long snapper role after the Packers were on a little bit of an odyssey there, no pun intended with the cultural references at the moment. But the fact is that now they got to get the kicker spot left. They've invested 2 6-round picks into the position now. They did sign McManus. They've been through, you can see the list of all these kickers that have been through the last few years. I think Haversick, when that question came up about, well, if you cut McManus, what does that mean for the competition? I think Lucas Haversick's going to provide plenty of competition. It's up to Trey Smack now to show, okay, I was undisputed the top kicker in this draft and really the only one that got drafted.
Yep.
I can do this straight away in the National Football League. I can take everything I did in the SEC, kicking in front of 100,000 people, and translate it here to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
No doubt about it. Well, with that, we will call it a wrap on this comeback edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. Training camp, the first practice is Wednesday. We'll be back with another show on Thursday with our observations from that first practice, and then keep it rolling twice a week here for the next, 5-6 months, something like that.
Heck yeah. 7 months.
All right, 7 months, Wes says.
We're going to February.
All right, 7 months, Wes says. So for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody.